Am I back to doing mid-month and final wrap-up? I don't know. I know y'all sick of me because I'm sick of me. So if I'm sick of me, y'all got to be sick of me because this is what I get for being so indecisive. I have problems. Hey y'all, it's Asha Bookashram, and as you can see from the title of this video, I'm here to do my final April wrap-up shenanigans. I don't know if I'm back doing a mid-month and a final. We may be back to that format. I don't know. I feel like my weekly wrap-ups are just as long as my mid-month and final wrap-ups. So I was like, oh, this will save me on the editing process. It doesn't save me anything. So here we are. That's it. We'll see what happens. I don't know. No promises here. I know y'all are like, dang girl, can you just find a way to talk about the books that you read in a month? I'm trying to. I'm trying so hard. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what happened in April. So April was 30 and 30, and so I had some interesting reading going on because it was 30 and 30. I didn't really read a lot outside of the manga that I was reading because reading 30 volumes of manga in 30 days is a lot for me. And so I did complete the challenge of reading 30 volumes of manga. But if you want to hear more about that, I did vlog the entire process, and so all of that stuff is over on my second channel, which is The Realm of Comics. So be sure to check that out. I did finish 2 other graphic novels / comics during the month of April, which also, if you want to hear more about that stuff, it is on my comic book channel. But I did end up reading Spy School, the graphic novel, which was really good. And then I ended up reading Static Season 1 because this was our Realm of Comics book club pick for the month of April. So some of these books that I have here listed, because I do have a list here, I have already talked about, so I will make sure that I link the relevant videos in the card symbol above. And then we'll dive into the stuff that I haven't necessarily talked about yet on my channel. So the first thing that I did end up reading, and I talked about already, was Killjoy. This is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, book 1.5, which serves as a prequel. I think I gave that 3.5 stars. Wasn't anything like mind-boggling, blown away. I did end up reading Corrine by Rebecca Morrow, which we did a whole live show discussion about who this person possibly is that wrote Corrine. I talked about it in length, and we did, like I said, we did a live show. It was myself, Mari, Mara, Rachel, and Bethany. I ended up giving Corrine 2 out of 5 stars. It just was not my personal jam. It wasn't my jam at all. I also ended up reading Notes of a Native Son, which I did a live show talking about Notes of a Native Son with Erica from The Broken Spine, as well as Josh from Josh's Book Voyage. And I really ended up enjoying that one and ended up giving it 5 stars. It's one of the best books that I read in the month of April. I also ended up talking a little bit about Momo Arashima Steals the Sword of the Wind, which is a first in a new middle grade series that's based on Japanese mythology. I enjoyed that one. I believe I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then I also ended up reading Dirty Laundry, which was a messy book, but it was like a solid 3-star read for me. Domestic thriller. And then the last one that I read that I talked about already was Love is a Revolution, and I ended up giving that one 4 out of 5 stars. It was an interesting reading experience because a lot of adults that read Love is a Revolution do not like it, but it's also not intended for adults, definitely intended for teens. So if you are an adult, I would definitely check out my review on that one, because I think that adults are going to have a harder time with that one just because of the nature of the topics and stuff. But I do talk about that in the video where I do my full review of that one. But let's go ahead and dive into the stuff that I haven't talked about yet this month, including the infamous Ruths, The Family Saga by Alex Haley. I did end up reading that, but we're going to dive into that in a second. Okay, so the first one that I ended up completing that I haven't talked about yet, I talked a little bit about it at the end of my last video, and that's Remind Me to Hate You Later. This is a young adult contemporary / realistic fiction book that focuses on 2 friends, Natalie and Jules. They're best friends. And Jules has a mom that she's a mommy influencer, and she documents a lot of her experience being a parent to Jules. And it's very problematic. She says and she does things that makes Jules extremely uncomfortable. She is not really aware of how Jules feels about anything, or she's not taking heed to what Jules is saying about her feelings. Like, please don't post me, please stop talking about me. I'm just past the point where I want you to do those things. I'm getting older now. Her mom doesn't listen, and Jules ends up dying by suicide. And then we are going through the grieving process with Natalie. So there are a lot of content warnings for this one. Discussions about self-harm, suicidal ideation, suicide, grief, loss of a loved one. I think here's where this was a difficult one for me, and I put this in my review. I struggled with this one. I still gave it 4 stars. Put it out there, I gave it 4 stars. I struggled with this one because I did not realize that the first part of the book is actually from Jules' perspective. And that was hard. Because inevitably from the summary that Jules dies by suicide. But to read from her perspective and to really see how she's feeling and how much she's struggling, I think it hit me a lot harder than I anticipated. So this is not a book that I would recommend lightly. This is not a book that I would definitely recommend reading when you're not in the right headspace. And thank goodness I was at a decent enough headspace where it didn't drag me down too much, but it definitely was an emotional read. I think that the author does a very, very good job of discussing the issues that come with influencing. And so this was a powerful read for me for a number of reasons, including the fact that I do a lot of social media things and I have a child of my own, and I don't post my child very often, and that's because she's getting older, and I'm very conscious of how that may or may not impact her. Now, I'm definitely not on the level of, some of these family or mommy influencers that are, have hundreds of thousands of followers, but still, you, as a parent, you can take kind of the criticism that comes with being on the internet and being a part of social media, but it's not something that you would ever wish for your child. And in the context of this story, you get a lot of that dealing with her mother and her posting things and people commenting on Jules. Jules is plus size, and so there's comments about her body, there's comments about her sex life, which it's very invasive, intrusive, and her mother just lacks any type of awareness of how harmful this could be for her child. And so really going step by step with that through Jules, and I did not know that was a thing, which I wish that was something that is made aware, because I think it's important for people to know that. I don't think it's a spoiler. I think it is a way to know whether you will be able to handle the content in this book and whether you're going to be the right state of mind to handle the content of this book. So I do like the commentary that was made about that. I also really enjoyed the discussions that we got with Natalie, who is going through the process of grieving a best friend. This is someone that she's grown up with, that she's known for an extremely long time. And what do you do, with the person you do everything with is no longer there? And what do you do when you feel some guilt about the fact that the person that you love, one of the people that you love the most, is gone, and you feel like you're partly responsible for that? And so she goes through that entire process, and we also get some interactions that she has with Jules's ex-boyfriend and them trying to navigate their grief together, and what that may lead to emotionally for the two of them spending so much time together. And then there is also this deep dive into how Natalie feels about Jules's mom, and it's not great. It's a lot of anger and a lot of hatred, because she feels like she was responsible. She took part in why Jules ends up dying, and it's hard for her to move past that and to forgive Jules's mother for not listening to Jules sooner. And she has to reckon with the fact that Jules was very sick. She had a lot of mental health issues, and it's hard for her to kind of reckon with that. I think my biggest criticism of this book is that I wish that we would have got a perspective from Jules's mom, or a little bit more of a perspective, because there were like portions of it, because her mom is essentially writing this book, and it pisses Natalie off, because Natalie's like, you're writing a book, your child just died by suicide, and you are writing a book about it. And so we get pieces and portions of that narrative of her telling her story, but I wanted a more internal perspective of the mother, because she's very hard to like as one parent to another. And as parents, we make mistakes. We do things all the time that we're not proud of. No parent is perfect at all. We all bring our issues to the table. We try our hardest not to, but I am by no means a perfect parent. But there's just that whole essence of her daughter saying enough is enough, and she didn't heed, to that. She took no heed to what Jules's desires were in terms of her social media. And so that made me very angry as a parent. But then I had these conflicting feelings, because the ultimate loss for her in all of this was that she no longer gets to see her daughter. She no longer gets to be around her daughter. She no longer gets to hold her daughter. And so she suffered a major loss. But it's also, taking responsibility for the part that she played in it, the role that she played in it. But overall, a very strong young adult book. I didn't know what I was going to think of it when I started reading it, but it's 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing that I ended up reading was one of those acorn books that I always talk so much about, that I've been really enjoying. And the first one, well, I read 2 of them. The first one that I ended up reading was Drive It, Fix It. And this literally is just about a young girl. It's very, very simplistic, not really much plot to it. This book was perfect for like kindergarten or first grade. They are designed in a way to help emerging readers or kids that are starting to read more independently. So center structure is really simplistic. It literally is about a girl who has a race car, and she's going to go race the car, and she has some issues with it, and she has to fix those issues so that she can possibly win the race. I thought it was cute, simplistic, something that I definitely could share with my daughter, even though she is only 3. It's a simplistic read aloud that we could do. So I ended up giving that one 4 stars as well. And then the second one that I ended up reading, which I really, really liked, was Awesome Orange Party. And this one focuses on a young girl who loves doing DIY, like party stuff. Like, she's really, really good at it. And so she helps design her aunt's birthday party, and her favorite color is orange. So everything at the party is orange: food, attire, decorations. And it's cute because you see her go through the process of like designing the decorations, figuring out what to wear, what the menu is going to be, and watching them celebrate the party, and essentially like watching her business grow. So this is the first book in a series. The second book has come out as well. I think the third book comes out sometime this fall, and I'm really, really excited to read it, because I'm interested in seeing how this business is going to flourish and grow from where she starts off. But I really enjoyed that one too, and I ended up giving that one 4 out of 5 stars. I then read one of those, they're beginner reader level readers, but they're in graphic novel format. And so I've been checking out a couple of those. They're usually called I Can Read Comics. And the first one that I had read was, what was it? Something and Wave. Was it Fish and Wave? Maybe it was Fish and Wave or something like that. But this one was Fish and Sun. And it focuses on this fish that doesn't want to just hang out in the ocean. It's boring, it's dark, and so they want to kind of explore more. So they swim up to the surface and they meet the sun, and they hang out with the sun all day, and then eventually the sun sets and they're like, oh no, I'm never going to see the sun again. We had so much fun together. So it's just a cute little concept of understanding that the sun has to rise and set every single day, and when the sun is up is the time to have fun and play and enjoy. And so it was cute. Literally took me like 5 minutes to read, but I really, really ended up liking that one. I thought it was enjoyable as well, and I'm excited to read more of those I Can Read comic graphic novel level readers, and I include them on here because they are graphic novels, but at the same time they're not. It's a very weird mesh that publishing is doing now, which I'm excited about. But as a person that has a comic book channel and then, you know, my book channel, I'm kind of like, okay, so what, like, where do I discuss this? So I do discuss them on both channels. Next, I ended up reading the first book in the Circle of Magic series or Circle of Magic Quartet by Tamora Pierce, and I am doing a read along with quite a few people. We just had our first live show, which we discussed the first book, Sandry's book, which was really good. I am an undercover fan of Tamora Pierce. I read the Song of the Lioness Quartet with Bethany a while ago, and she reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to do the Circle of Magic Quartet, and I was like, yeah, because I really did enjoy the Song of the Lioness Quartet. And this one I ended up giving 4 stars. It focuses on 4 kids who've all gone through like these super tragic events, like horrible events, and so they're all taken to this place where they're supposed to become more comfortable with their magic, and they don't have traditional magic. One of them does magic with weaving, then there's metalwork, then there's weather, and then there's one that deals primarily with plants. And so very, very interesting magic system. And this first book is very introductory in the sense that we're getting to know each of the characters and their backstory and how they work together, their personalities, how they do and do not mesh, and watching them build this camaraderie that is definitely going to play a part in whatever big thing that they have to defeat and face later on in the series. I loved Briar. Briar was my baby. I absolutely adore him. He's just the sweetest and just the sweetest and funniest little kid ever. I really enjoyed that there were positive adult role models in this, meaning that they were there to help build these kids back up after they'd been through so much and provide them a safe space, a safe home, and still make sure they're abiding by the rules, but also saying like, this is not something that you have to worry about. Being able to take a bath, sleep in a comfortable bed, eat food, like this is not stuff that you as children should be concerned about, and we're going to make sure you're not concerned. You have to follow the rules, but we want you to feel like you're safe and you can depend upon people and that you have kind of like a sanctuary. It very much so felt therapeutic. I know when we were in the live show, I was like, goodness gracious, like the way that Tamora Pierce wrote a lot of this, it felt like a therapy session, like letting go of anger and not holding grudges for your sake, and breathing and learning how to do breath work so you can work through your emotions and building that emotional intelligence. And then while we were on the library, found out that she had a degree in social work or studied psychology, I believe, had a degree in social work, and was a group home mother. So it all makes sense, it all adds up. But either way, it was a 4-star read for me, and I am definitely excited to dive into the next book, and our next discussion will be probably sometime at the end of this month. All right, so I ended up reading some picture books as well, because I told you I'm on my picture book game this year. Like, I have to be on my picture book game this year. I ended up first reading That Flag, which, oh, Kara and I talked about this during that live show for the Circle of Magic read along, and it is such a great picture book. First of all, the artwork is great. The artist on this, his name is Nikolas. He did the work for the 1619 project Born on the Water, which is an absolutely gorgeous picture book. Love it, love it, love it. So he did the work in this one, so I knew I was going to love the artwork. But it's about these 2 girls, one black, one white, and they're friends at school, but the white girl's family flies the Confederate flag in her yard, and the black girl knows that outside of school she's not to go to that house, she's not to really engage or talk to them whatsoever, and she doesn't know exactly why, except her family keeps telling her basically it's that flag, and she's still kind of like, I don't know, or I don't get it, because she doesn't understand the history behind the flag. And so they end up going to this museum exhibit, and her dad goes with her, and then she sees the flag again, and then they discuss why that flag is so offensive. And basically you kind of watch them, the two girls, have to interact again with the black girl, knowing now the history behind that flag. It's a very, very insightful picture book that will generate a lot of conversations amongst families, which I think is very important. But the artwork and the storytelling were A+, definitely going to be one of my top ones for the year. So that was a 5-star read, hands down a 5-star read. I also ended up reading My Powerful Hair, and this was by Carole Lindstrom and Steph Littlebird. Now, I've read Carole Lindstrom's books before, but I was excited about this one. I want to show y'all some of the artwork in here. That's why I like having my copies of my picture books when I do these, so that I can show you how beautiful the artwork is. This is a picture book that focuses on Native and Indigenous cultural history as it pertains to hair. And so we follow this main character who has short hair that's kind of cropped up to her ears, and then we follow her as she begins to grow her hair out, and she signifies the importance of her hair and the interactions that she's had that are literally woven into her hair, ceremonial purposes that are closely attached to hair. And the author gives a brilliant and beautiful note at the end explaining the history behind residential schools and how it was not uncommon for Native and Indigenous children to not only lose their culture, their language, but also their hair. And so once you had one person in the family whose hair was cut because they were taught that long hair was wild, it was unkept, then you have a whole entire generation after generation after generation that kind of follows that without realizing the ramifications of it. And so this is a reclaiming of loving your hair as it grows. And as a black woman, even though I do not share the same experiences as those who identify as Native and Indigenous, y'all, when I tell y'all I ate this up, it's so important to realize and understand that colonization is very far-reaching. It's more reaching. It reaches out further. That's what I was trying to say. It reaches out further than what people anticipate. I think that a lot of times colonization, people think of stripping land, and people think of taking over areas and people associated with slavery. But you know, a lot of times we think about culture as this big thing, which it is, but we don't take the time to look at the tiny parts, the many parts of culture that are impacted by colonization, like hair. And hair is very sacred to a lot of communities, and colonization has ruined that for a lot of communities, Black community included. And so I was not aware of a lot of things that were discussed in this book. I did not know about the cultural practices associated with hair as it applies to Native and Indigenous communities. And this book just left me with so many thoughts and so much more that I want to learn and understand, because I was not actively aware. But this is good. If you are looking for another picture book that generates great conversations, that highlights the Native and Indigenous experience, this is it. That's it. That is the book to read. There's another Native, and I'm just gonna tell y'all, as a librarian, I'm so happy to see so many Native and Indigenous books coming out this year, because out of all of publishing trends, Native and Indigenous communities are the least represented in children's lit, and it bothers me. But I'm glad to see the uptick in materials that are now coming up, because I have another one. So the other one that I read was Remember, and this one is gorgeous, y'all. The artwork in this one is gorgeous as well. It is beautiful. These two, oh, I love the art in this one. It is fantastic. The color palette, just the illustrations, and oh my goodness gracious, like, look at this. Look at that. It's beautiful. So this is one that discusses the importance of remembering where you come from, where you are, and your connection to everything on the planet. And it literally goes section by section and just discusses, remember like everyone around you, remember everything that's in motion, remember everything that's growing, remember like that you're the universe is you, remember just how you are connected to everything. And I just the author makes a note about how poetry is just a vital part of communities and how it feeds our mind and our spirit and the connection to her cultural background. I was just stunned by the text and the artwork. The collaboration between the two of them was fantastic. It was so great, y'all. Another one that you definitely need to check out. The next one that I have here is A Crown for Corrine. This is one that focuses on telling the story about the tradition behind the Mexican flower crown. So we essentially are following Corrine, who's picking the flowers for her crown. It's her turn and her day to pick the flowers for her crown. And so she goes through her abuela's garden and she picks all of these beautiful, gorgeous flowers. And each flower has a meaning. And so she picks flowers for her family members and where she's come from. And then it switches over and she's responsible for picking flowers for who she wants to be and where she wants to go in life. And so this one was an interesting story because I did not know much about, I'd never heard about the symbolism behind the Mexican flower crown. And this also had some very, very beautiful artwork as well. But I enjoyed this one. I gave this one 4 stars and these two 5 stars. Like, I love those books. They were so good. I really, really liked them. Okay, so I saved this one for last because this was an accomplishment this month. So I ended up reading Roots by Alex Haley. It took me a couple weeks to read it because I did end up reading this one rather slow, which was in digital. I didn't want to rush through it. It was a 30+ hour audiobook and I actually like started listening to it at 1.25 because it is a family saga. And so I knew it was going to be a lot of information. I wanted to be able to process it the way that I needed to process it. This has a lot of content warnings and I wish I would have taken better notes at the content warnings, but it covers in part chattel slavery. So you can only imagine the level of graphic materials that are in this book, which is more than this, definitely not limited to, I mean, we definitely see chattel slavery. There's rape, there is violence, including amputation, there's whipping, there is continuous rape, there is just slur after slur after slur after slur after slur. And it's some very hard family dynamics. So I'm gonna just kind of give you a basic summary of what the book is and talk a little bit about the controversy that comes with Roots. So I had never read Roots before. I've seen the adaptations and was somewhat familiar with the story because of adaptations, but it's been a while since I've seen either one of them. You know, there's the old one and then the one that the History Channel ended up doing. And it's supposedly Alex Haley's attempt to trace his family history back to West Africa. And there is some issue with it because it has been discovered that one part of this book has been plagiarized and he had admitted to it being plagiarized. And he settled out of court with that. There was a second plagiarism allegation, but that one was found to be not true based off of looking at both works. It was later found that there was no way that Alex could have traced his heritage back to Kunta Kinte, and even though he said he talked to a griot, which is a person who engages in oral storytelling, there's no way that he would have gotten the information that he supposedly said that he had gotten from this person. And then later on down the line, I believe that someone in his family was tested for DNA and it proved that he was connected elsewhere. And so it's amazing because this is a Pulitzer Prize winning book. but it's one that I think often gets left out of, you know, books that discuss the great American classics because of the history behind it. I think that if Alex Haley would have just sold this as a fictional narrative, it would have not been so tainted in the long run. Although that plagiarism accusation was pretty intense, but at the same time, you cannot deny the impact that Roots has had on generations of people and the interests that he kind of drove into Black people trying to figure out their genealogy, which is extremely important because for a lot of Black people, you get to a certain point in your genealogy and then it just stops because there's no record. You think about slavery, no one kept record of that, and so you don't know. You have no idea who you are related to or where you come from, and a lot of what people have a tendency to know about their family and traditions is done through oral storytelling, which is why oral storytelling is such a big part of Black culture, because that is a way that we have been able to keep family histories alive without accurate documentation. For example, for me, on my mom's side, I don't really know anything past my great-great-grandmother, and she 9 times out of 10 could have been born right as slavery was ending, or maybe 10 to 15 years after that. And so my mom knew my great-great-grandmother. I did not. She passed before I was born. But I definitely knew my great-grandmother, who was born after World War I. So, there's just bits, like there's no running record after her at all, which I wish I would have spent a little bit more time getting information from my great-grandmother about where her mother came from, and, more even about my great-great-great-grandmother. But beside the point. So the book follows a lot of generations of people. We start with Kunta Kinte, who is stolen and brought to the States at the time, which this would have been in the 18th century, that he was brought to the States in Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. And so he goes through this whole experience of not knowing, nothing. Thrown on a ship, Middle Passage, very, very gruesome details about his experience on the Middle Passage. Down to human excrement and the way that they were kept, the way that they were beat, the things that they would see when people jumped overboard, and like sharks literally waiting to eat humans. It was not fun to read. And there was a lot of points in reading this book that I was pissed. The amount of anger that I felt in reading this. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's so interesting because while a lot of this is not true to Alex Haley claiming this to be his family history, this is true of the time in which it took place. These events, these things that happened are things that that did occur, and it was so hard. It was so hard to read that section, and then by the time he makes it to the auction to get sold off, he's very, very confused. He's been stripped of everything. He'll never see his mother or father again, or his siblings. And I think for me, like, that's grappling with the fact that so many people who were sold into slavery literally never ever were able to communicate nor see their family again. And I knew that, but I think, like, reading it through this narrative, it was just kind of like, okay, so that's it. You're just kind of like stripped away from your family. Suddenly, you don't speak the same language as anyone that is going on this Middle Passage with you. Like, it would be a stroke of luck if you're able to find someone who spoke the same language as you, and then even then, like, you know, everyone culturally is so different, and yet you have these people who are engaging in slavery who are assuming that you're all the same and you're not. You have different cultural practices, different languages, different traditions, and you're all forced to come to this place that you have no knowledge of, forced into slavery and forced to communicate in a language that you don't understand nor do you know. I think one of the most interesting parts of Kunta Kinte's narrative was his outlook on Black people. And it's interesting to me because there's still kind of like this dichotomy sometimes with Black people and Black Americans and those who are from various countries on the continent of Africa, and how our experiences are so different and how we view each other. It's very, very interesting. And so he explores a little bit of that, where Kunta's kind of like, it's interesting because these Black people, and he calls them like these Black people, don't even know that they have traditions that they're practicing that are native to my people, and they have no idea, because it's traditions that have been passed on without really explicitly stating like, this is coming from, you know, my homeland. This is traditions that we practice that now have been passed along to those of you who've been here now for 100+ years, and you just have no idea. The wrapping your hair, the things that you would sing, the things that you would cook are very much so things of your ancestors, and you're just not even aware that it is part of your ancestral history. And so I found that to be very fascinating, because it's just very true. And Kunta is just not here for the business at all. Kunta was like, excuse me, you Black people, I don't know what's wrong with y'all, but I'm not finna call no, I forget what he calls white people. He has a special name that he calls white people in this book. And he's just like, I'm not dealing with this shit. Like, he was too fed up, and I do not blame him. And it was just a different experience. I think he just, even on his deathbed, and we don't get to see him pass away because of the unfortunate way that we switched to the next narrative. And so Kunta Kinte ends up meeting Belle, and Belle and Kunta Kinte have a daughter by the name of Kizzy, and Kizzy gets involved with somebody that ends up trying to run, and so Kizzy is sold away from her parents. And so when we switch the narrative, we're meeting Kizzy and how she functions under this new slave owner, and we get this very complex narrative with her son George. And it's hard because George is the product of a slave and slave master rape. And this was also a very difficult section for me, because I can't think of how many times this happened, how many times now we deal with, the Black community deals with a lot of colorism, and a lot of that stems from systems that were set up during this time in history. And you see that with George and how much it impacts him because of his identity, knowing who his father is and struggling, and it's never explicitly stated, but his actions and the way he deals with his own kids, the way that he deals with his wife, it was hard. It was hard, and I'm just gonna put it out here. I apologize if this is a spoiler, but I just feel like I need to address this. I talked to my dad about this. George's father is his master, his slave master. Imagine sitting next to your biological father, and he's using the N-word in a derogatory way, telling you how y'all are useless, you don't ever have nothing else to say, you have nothing to say except a yes and massa. You don't have anything else that could come out your mouth besides a yes and massa. You can't think. And it's just like, to sit next to a man that is your biological father, that you have to answer this man and say yes a master, yes a massa to your father. The amount of psychological and emotional damage that did is of no, I don't even know. I don't even have the words, y'all. That section hit very, very hard because there's a lot of issues that have occurred because of the way that white men treated black women, and as a result how white women treated black women because of what their husbands were doing. And it's created a lot of views and perspectives of black women. It's created a lot of issues with hair with black women. There are laws that were put into existence because of white women being pissed that their husbands were raping black women, and they wanted to blame the black women for the fact that their husbands were doing inappropriate and disgusting things to black women. I just couldn't get past that. But let me go on, because I will end up giving a whole dissertation on this book. Okay, so we also get the perspective of Chicken George, who's not my favorite character for a number of reasons. I just don't like the way he ends up marrying this woman by the name of Hilda, and they have a lot of kids, and he's just not great with his kids. And I think a lot of that stems from the nature of how he was born and recognizing who his father was, and then that relationship. I think he struggled a lot with that. So they have a lot of kids, but we primarily get our focus through Tom. And Tom is kind of like the complete opposite of his father. He's good with his hands, metal worker, and so that's how he decides to kind of make a living. And George goes absent, I won't say why, for a period of time, and so they kind of try to stick together as a family until George appears again. Tom ends up marrying a woman by the name of Irene, and they also have a lot of kids. The focus primarily comes from their daughter Cynthia. And then Cynthia ends up getting married, and they end up having a daughter by the name of Bertha. And this is where we kind of see like the generational change in terms of like importance or acknowledgement of like going to like school and getting an education. And so there's a lot of things that end up changing in terms of how black people start to view themselves by the time that, and that those are Alex Haley's parents. So that's where you start to see kind of like this shift, which is really, really interesting. I think one of the things that I liked, and like I said, so then after you see those two, we end up getting to Alex Haley, and Alex Haley ends up talking a lot about his experience in trying to figure out and define his family history, and how he talked to all of his family, and everybody just started connecting back to this man by the name of Kunta Kinte. And, you know, during the research, writing the book, which if you would have just left that section out, it would have been straight, because I think one of the things I really, really enjoyed about this book too is that it's not just a hyper fixation just on the family unit. There's also these discussions about what's happening historically during these time periods, and it's often communicated through the slaves. Like, okay, you know, like the Revolutionary War is about to happen, when the Civil War happened. It's all of these various communications and like word traveling about like what the British wanted and what the Civil War meant for our slaves, and when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, like what that meant for them while they were on the plantation. So there are a lot of historical events that are kind of encompassed within the framework of the entire story, which I did appreciate, because it would have been awkward to kind of talk about all these things and then not kind of at least pull in a little bit of what would have been going on socially and politically during that time period, like the mentioning of presidents and all types of various things, which is pretty fascinating. So there was that. The writing of it was pretty easy to get through. I didn't find myself bored or confused. It was rushed towards the end as we started getting closer to Alex Haley in the genealogy. It got rushed. So we were getting a little less character development. We were getting a little less about family members. I think that the primary parts of the book are very much so focused on Kunta Kinte and Kizzy and George and Tom. Like the biggest chunks of the book come from those four. So you have Kunta, Kizzy, George, and Tom are kind of like the long line. And it's interesting because Alex Haley kind of weaves in like the concept of oral storytelling in this as well. So you see each kind of like line of family start to say, did I tell you about, you know, your granddaddy who's all the way from Africa, and your great granddaddy and great great granddaddy and great 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 granddaddy who came all the way from Africa. And that's kind of like him emphasizing the importance of oral storytelling. So it's kind of hard for me to rate this one, y'all, because I haven't written a review for it yet, and I'm struggling because it's not really a true story. When you think about it in the grand scheme of things, there's, like I said, this accusation of plagiarism, and then this is the fact that it's not really a true story because of so many things that were discovered after the fact. But it is a damn good, compelling story, and you can't really deny that. And so I'm kind of like torn, and I mean, like, I don't know. I'm thinking about going with 4 stars, but also like cautioning, like, if you go into this thinking about it in a fictional way and from the perspective of like a family saga, I think you will enjoy it. But if you go in thinking about it in terms of like, oh, this is a historically accurate narrative that can be traced all the way back to Alex Haley, I don't know about that. But I think I'm gonna go with a 4-star rating. It was an experience. And I'm glad that I finally read it. I'm glad I finally read it. So I have a couple things that I am currently reading. You see my pen? I have my little checklist here in front of me. Which I realized I'm filming at a very awkward angle. Like, I look very, there's a lot of space around, whatever. At this point, I just don't care. So, I just don't care. You can't even see my neck. I don't know how I position the camera today. But I put this as currently reading, but at the time of filming this video, I'm done with it. So it doesn't matter. I ended up reading Nick Blake and the Remarkables. This is by Angie Thomas. I'll talk about that when I do a wrap up, but that was going to be currently reading, but I'm done with that one. I'm still currently reading It's One of Us by J.T. Ellison. This is a domestic thriller that I'm enjoying. Like, I'm really getting a kick out of this one. I'm enjoying it, so there's that. And then I'm also currently reading A Half-Baked Murder, which is a marijuana cozy mystery. So, marijuana bake shop cozy mystery, which is probably going to be like an average, like 3.5. The domestic thriller I'm really enjoying because I think it's making some commentary about the one by J.T. Ellison. It's making some commentary about sperm banks and just the ethics behind that. And so yeah, it's just, you gotta look up that one. There's content warnings for that one, for definitely for infertility, miscarriage, and it drives the narrative. So if those are content warnings for you that you know are going to bother you, I highly recommend steering away from that one. All right, y'all, so that is my final April wrap up. There's so much stuff. There's so much stuff. It's just, it was a lot, but it's okay. I did end up enjoying it. What I read in April, I ended up reading quite a bit, which is fine. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. And yeah, that's pretty much it, y'all. Let me know what you read in the comments. Let me know in the comments what you read in April. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to follow me on social media or to support the channel via Patreon, all links will be down in the description box below, and I'll be back with another video soon.